Alright guys, what's going on? My name is Jack, and today we're going to be talking about Escape from Tarkov. Now, Escape from Tarkov is a very special game. It has grown to be one of my favorite games that I've been playing in the new year, but it is not free of issues and debate within the community. And the topic that is making the most rounds right now, with labs and with all of these new keys flowing around, is are hatcheting runs a problem within the game? What I wanted to do, I went around, I did my research, I asked within the community some much better players than myself about their opinions on hatching and how they think it affects the game. I'm also going to present my opinion and what I think should be done. I'm going to offer up a variety of solutions. I'm going to talk about many aspects of hatching, the good and the bad, and just talk about the state of the game in general and what potentially Battlestate Games could do to remedy or change the system as it stands right now, because it's undeniable that there is in fact an issue. The more interesting aspect of that discussion is what exactly that solution should be and what it actually entails. So let's lay some groundwork. Obviously, there is a very, very low risk associated with going into a raid with a key bar in your gambit container or whatever container you have and go on to maps like Shoreline or even just into labs with nothing and hatcheting valuable spawns. Running in with nothing, trying to slap as much into your gamma as possible. Maybe you go up and you poke a scab in the face with your knife. Regardless, if you die, you lose nothing. If you get out, you gain everything that's in your gamma, plus whatever you get off of kills or looted bodies or even random gun spawns. There is an inverse risk-reward factor currently within the game, whereas if you go into a raid with an 800k ruble kit, you now have the worry of, can I make back the 800,000 rubles that I am taking into this raid to be operating at a profit? That's a lot higher risk, because if you get dropped, you're out 800,000 rubles, and you're not necessarily guaranteed to find the items equal to or more than that investment. If you just get killed immediately, it's a net loss. Whereas with hatcheting, you're going in with zero. Everything you grab from the moment you grab that raid, even if you just grab ammo, as shit as it could be, weapon mods as shit as they can be, valuables as worthless as they can be, if you go into a raid right now and you pick up 2 matches, a duct tape, and a blue tape, you still end up with a net profit on that run. That is definitely a concern. You want there to be risks to all aspects of a game like this, I think. If you're going in with nothing, there should be drawbacks to going in with nothing, not just, well, died, but I slapped a Bitcoin, a rooster, and a fucking aquamarine in my box. As it stands right now, the risk-reward scales completely opposite how it should. You should feel a lot of security going into a raid fully kitted. You should be like, okay, I spent this money, this gear gives me a safety net that says that low gear players, scavs, even mid gear players really can't do anything to me. Now it comes down to, how can I play against people of equal gear? That is like kind of the current end game. But that's not really how it plays out. When you go in, and maybe this is different from player to player, if you're really good at PvP, maybe you don't suffer from this as much. I go into a raid fully kitted, worried about, can I kill enough and loot enough to make up and profit off of this investment? I'm worried about, in that raid, making my money back. Because for average players, spending 800,000, sometimes millions of rubles onto expensive kits can be very daunting, because if you just get dropped, you lose everything. If you do frag out, yeah, you can make pretty equal and sometimes better money than what you invested, but if you do lose, when you're a 20% survival rate player like I am, it can be very disheartening. You don't want to run gear. It's not necessarily gear fear, it's like fear of bankruptcy if you're running a small business. I guess that's a great way to put it. I don't really give a shit about the guns because they're replaceable. What I give a shit about is the money, which is much harder to replace. It's a finite resource. It's a resource you are constantly investing. And it's very appealing to go low or no gear onto a map like Shoreline and have the potential to make hundreds of thousands of rubles. Yes, I do have to invest in the keys to make Shoreline profitable. But the comparison is, let's say it costs like 5 million rubles to get the good keys on Shoreline. Don't quote me on that. That's not exact. I'd have to get on and check the flea market, and I'm not doing that right now. But let's say it's a 5 million ruble investment to get these shoreline keys and start running hatches on shoreline. The difference between this scenario and 800k spent on every single raid is that you're spending 5 million rubles on an infinite number of zero-cost raids that will always net a profit as long as you don't spawn and immediately fucking croak. That is definitely the problem with the hatcheting system. Now, there are definitely many suggestions on how to handle this and how to change this for the better for the state of the game. I'm going to go over quite a few of them because there are lots of opinions on how this should be done. I'm going to go for the ones that I think are the least possible to the most possible. The obvious one that jumps out that a lot of people say is make a lobby just for hatchets. Essentially have it like how in some games have like a toxicity queue where if you're a known toxic player you will queue into players who have also been flagged as toxic. But instead of that, you just have a marker, this guy has no gear, put him into a raid with all no gears. I think that's just straight up a bad idea because any kind of player-based fracturing is a great way to make queue times universally longer. I mean, you may not think it is because it would disincentivize people to hatchet, but at the end of the day, it doesn't change how profitable hatcheting is, therefore people are just going to do it, and now it's going to be even harder to find full shoreline games when you're a kitted player. That actually amplifies the problem of there being no people to play with. Just instead of there being raids only full of hatchlings that are easy to deal with, you now just have empty raids. It's not a good solution, it's not one that should go with. I don't think that this should happen. And I really think it's just kind of absurd. I don't think it would work. The next solution is to have like a value to your gear. Like when you go to queue up, you have a gear score. That way, when you die and someone picks up your dog tag, there is a multiplier on the price of that dog tag based on the amount of gear that you had. So that if you go in and you bop Mr. SA-58 with his fast MT mandibles and his fucking fort, you're gonna get a dog tag that's worth, let's just say, 80,000 rubles. Whereas if you bop Joe Schmo 2004 with his fucking shovel out, you're only gonna get a couple thousand rubles. This one I really don't think is a bad idea overall. I don't think it's a good enough solution to disincentivize hatching or fix the problem with hatcheting. However, I don't really think it's a bad idea. I think if anything, it kind of adds almost like a bounty system to the game in a way, because when you think about it, now you're almost like a high value target when you have high gear. There are pros and cons to having it be like that, because now you're going to be hunted even more and you're going to feel even less incentivized to be high gear in raids. Yes, I do acknowledge that. However, I do like the idea of there being more value in killing someone who has juice over someone who has nothing. I just think it would need more work, and I'm not really sure how that would be best implemented into the game. I have to give a big shout out to Veritas. Obviously, there's no real need shouting him out properly, because if you're watching my video, I have like a 1,000th of his viewer base. So you probably know about his videos. If you follow Escape from Tarkov at all, I highly recommend you check them out. Anyway, if you don't, I was chatting with him on Twitter a good bit today before I started recording this, and he brought up some very good points. I'm not going to quote it verbatim, as I know he's working on his own videos in the background about similar topics, so I'm going to respect that. However, he did say something about some of these early suggestions that I thought made a lot of sense. He said that they're very bad because of the fact that they're putting arbitrary constraints on the game to force people to do what they want them to do. It's not good game design to pretty much put people in a box and say that you have to play a certain way, and I totally agree. A game like this is meant to be 100% open. You're supposed to be able to approach it however you want. That's the whole point of maxing out your traders, that's the whole point of unlocking everything, is that you can get to the point where you can say, I want to run a Remington 700 with a Gen 4 high mobile and an LZSH no face shield, or I want to run an SA-58 with 4 and an Altman, or I want to run PP-19 and one of those SSH helmets and go on labs. Like, putting any kind of constraint on what you can or can't do in a raid is a great way to just stray into bad game design, and I totally agree with that point. Now, let's move on to some options that I think are actually viable. Now, I'm also going to offer up some contradictions to these at the same time, as really there are ways to kind of debunk these or say that they're really not that good either. And that's to make loot spawns a variable, make it dynamic. make it to where you won't know on Shoreline, for example, that 310 is a valuable loot spawn guaranteed. Now, to be clear, there's already RNG in loot drops in general, so if you go to 310 100 times, you're going to find 100 different variations on valuable loot inside that room. However, you always know that there is a potential for valuables in 310, so Hatchet players on Shoreline will rush, check the lab security key spawn, and then will run straight to 310 because they know that they can make upwards of 25 million rubles checking 2 places on a map. It's very, very fast. However, if the system worked like this, let's say on Shoreline in the resort, every single room had the potential to spawn any loot. It was random. Weapon boxes would be in random spots every time. Weapon spawns would be in random spots every time. Valuable spawns would be random spawns every time. But there was a limit. Let's say there are 10 possible Bitcoin spawns on Shoreline. Only 4 would be active, and within those 4 locations, there would only be a limited chance of a Bitcoin being there. So you could get the 1 in 1,000 raid where you get 4 Bitcoins off the Shoreline. However, you would also have to have all of the keys to the unlockable doors in the resort and check every single spawn. It would make farming significantly more hard because there's no defined targeting as to what you should be going after. Now, there are objections to this. Now, the primary objective to this style of loot design is that it kind of forces you to basically complete a set of Shoreline keys. You can't necessarily only pick and choose what keys to get, you'd be forced to get everything, and that could dramatically affect key prices on the flea market and the overall health of the player-run economy. I acknowledge that. It also can be a significant pain in the fucking ass to check every single room in every single spot for a potential loot spawn. However, the reason why it would be so much harder is that if you went in with nothing, you're a lot more likely to get caught out by players. As it is right now, it's very safe to go run straight to Resort at the beginning of the game and check all of the relevant loot spawns before geared players have made their way over. If you had to actually pick through very carefully through the entirety of Resort, you're a lot more likely to come up against the players that are looking to fight there, and if you are hatcheting, that means you're pretty much fucking dead. Unless you get one of those random weapon spawns, which of course then there's like that interplay of you being able to kill higher gear players by outplaying them, and a whole other discussion I don't want to get into. I understand the sentiment that completing key sets for maps would be arbitrarily very annoying and probably force people to farm key locations, and also hyperinflate prices on the flea market. I really don't think randomized loot spawns is a perfect solution. I think it might be a step in the right direction, and as was pointed out to me once again by Veritas, the devs are working on a dynamic loot system where loot will be very responsive to when you last got it. So like if you were to go 310 and you got a Bitcoin, the next raid, your odds of getting the Bitcoin would be a lot less likely, is my understanding of that system. I don't know for sure. Please let me know in the comments down below if I'm mischaracterizing what they mean by a dynamic loot system. My next solution to combating hatchlings is to remove static key spawns. Now, before everyone freaks the fuck out that I just said get rid of static key spawns, let me explain. I don't think there should be, oh, here is this 25 million ruble key sitting on a desk in Shoreline. Because what has everyone been doing since that key has been located? No gear, rushing that key. I've done it. Me and my friend have hatched at least 200 Shoreline runs since that key has been found, and we've gone it once. I fully acknowledge that I was part of the problem of there being so many hatchlings on the Shoreline, because the amount of money you were able to make by just throwing yourself at Shoreline for the potential for this key, on top of being able to do resort keys after, was insane. There was no reason to run gear on Shoreline besides maybe a pistol, because there were tons of static gun spawns, a bunch of the rooms spawned weapons and weapon boxes, so you could go in with nothing, check for a 25 mil key, and then make a couple 100,000 rubles between you and 3 people, and potentially get guns and kill people. There was absolutely no risk involved. So me and many other players threw ourselves at the Shoreline, threw ourselves at the resort to try and make that fucking goo-wop. And it's understandable, because there's no risk. However, if the spawn for the arsenal security key was kept to scav backpacks only and raider backpacks only, and kept very rare, I would be forced to gear up so I could farm all the raiders in a lab instance, or farm all the scavs on woods very reliably. I've already done this, doing night raids on woods with a suppressed sub and going around and killing 30 scavs for the potential for the arsenal security storage key, which is worth 60 fucking million rubles right now, has actually been genuinely fun. It's the first time I've really engaged with night vision and going in on night raids with something other than just my fucking monitor gamma turned up. It's more fun to farm scavs than to farm a static key location. I understand that for certain quests, there kind of needs to be static keys. There are some situations where you need to make the keys accessible. I understand that. However, RNG may be annoying, but it's also not farmable. All you can do is keep killing scavs and keep killing raiders and hope that you come out fat. The drawbacks are, obviously, this would lead to dramatically inflated key prices in the player-run economy on the flea market. If every single key in the game had no static spawn and you had to farm scavs over and over, every single key in the game would probably double if not triple in price. I understand that this would not necessarily be the best solution, but maybe you could also kind of combine the two suggestions. Not necessarily have static key spawns, but have randomized key spawns, so that way you know that the arsenal security key spawns on Shoreline, but maybe there's like 6 or 7 spawn locations around the resort, and that's not necessarily just inside the resort wings, where you would have to check. And they would never be guaranteed, they'd be low spawn rates. That'd be a great way to fuck with people and make them have to explore more of the map, not have a set direct route where they know they can go in with nothing, they can go look for the key, then look for the rooms. You would then have to spend longer times in the raid, and when you spend longer times in the raid, you realize how useless you are with no gear. That would incentivize people more organically to bring gear in so you can defend yourselves from scavs and from players. I think this would very naturally and elegantly move people away from doing no gear runs. We'd still have a problem, if it's even a problem, of low gear runs, but I don't really think low gear is as big of a problem as no gear. So this part of the recording is done a few days after what you have been hearing for this entire time. The video, as much as it's been kind of cut in places and kind of snipped together, was all one take that I did right after coming home a few days ago. I've had some time to think about it because I haven't really had time to edit it, and I came up with a much better solution to what I was proposing at the very end of this video. Originally, this chunk of audio was meant to be a diatribe about the fact that there needs to be some form of way for worse players to be able to make money without the investment of gear if they're a low survival rate or bad at the PvP. And at the time, I was just making this point that hatcheting and low gear runs are that solution, but I'm a fucking idiot because scavs exist, and scavs are so fucking useless right now that I forgot they exist. Okay? The scav system should be what hatcheters go for when they want to make money. The scavs are what low gear is supposed to be. Scavenger is supposed to be no risk, everything you get out is straight profit, which is exactly what a hatchet run is. Albeit you can control what you're doing in a hatchet run more because of the fact you can bring keys and a gamma. That aside, the concept is very much the same. You're going into a raid with nothing, and all the money that you make from that raid is straight profit because your investment is zero. They need to rework the scav system slightly to make it more beneficial and accessible to people. There's multiple ways to do this, and we're going to keep this pretty brief, but suggestions that stand out to me right away that were brought up to me by a buddy of mine. Right now, if you shoot a player scav who is shooting you, you become scav aggro. There is no check within the scav AI that would allow you to respond to a player scav trying to destroy you. If you shoot that player scav, you're now scav hostile. That shouldn't be the case. You should be able to defend yourself as a scav without aggroing all the AI in the area around you. That's a really dumb way to do this, and I don't know if it's necessarily a bug or if it's just like a missed feature, but it needs to be changed regardless. That'd be a huge quality of life update to scavs. Also, scav skills should progress a lot faster than normal skills. Because of the fact that scavs, you can't take them out all the time. It's only every 10 minutes. When you're on a scav run, you should be gaining levels on your skills like endurance and vitality significantly faster, so that way, you know, your PMC may have level 15 endurance and you have 300 hours in this wipe, but your scav may only have level 5 or level 7 endurance because you don't get to play them every single raid like you could with your PMCs. Some other solutions, You can give player scavs better weapons so they have more of a chance to defend themselves. Obviously, that's kind of a problem because it disincentivizes running gear on your PMC. You can make player scav spawns better. A lot of the player scav spawns are kind of shit. You can make player scavs spawn at the same time as PMCs do instead of spawning late in the raids. That's a good solution. I have issues with that one as well, but it is a solution. Basically, Battlestate needs to find a way to make scav runs what people are doing instead of hatchet runs. You should be looking at the scav as your way to guaranteed make money, not going in with just a shovel as your way to make guaranteed money. Anyway, I just want to throw that in there as a quick addendum. I wish I had actually thought of that while I was recording, which is why I'm going back and doing it. Anyway, my name is Jack. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video.